Hello everyone, my name is Indira Lewis and today I'm giving you a presentation on the movie Bonhoeffer, Agent of Grace. And the movie is actually based on the true story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was born on February 4th, 1906 in the province of Silesia, which at the time was part of the German Kingdom of Prussia. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a renowned theologian. He was a Lutheran pastor, a writer, an author, as well as a musician. He was also one of the very few voices that opposed and resisted the Nazi ideology. In his earlier years, Bonhoeffer was known and regarded to be a pacifist, but as he became more aware of the atrocities of the Nazi regime, he became involved in the conspiracy to overthrow Hitler and to establish a new German government. He was later hung at the age of 39 for treason at the Flossenburg concentration camp in April 9, 1945, only 3 weeks before Hitler committed suicide. Bonhoeffer was a brilliant theologian who, after finishing his doctoral at Berlin, he traveled to New York for a year and he studied at the Union Theological Seminary School. He later was disappointed with the school because it didn't meet his expectations. He stated that there was no theology there. However, during this time, he met a good friend, a black student named Franklin Fisher. And Franklin, who also attended the Union Theological Seminary, introduced Bonhoeffer to Harlem and to what it was like to be black in America during that time. Bonhoeffer began to teach at Sunday schools at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Harlem, and he developed long-life relationships there. He developed also a love and a concern for the black community, and overall a concern for the disfranchised and the oppressed. Once Bonhoeffer went back to Berlin, he became a professor at the University of Berlin at the age of 24. And his teaching style was very relational, very personal, and something that the students had never seen before. Bonhoeffer became very concerned at this time as well with the Jews, and he began to find means for immigration of the Jews because of the systematic persecution that the Nazis had begun. Bonhoeffer and his friend Klaus believed that the major responsibility, or one of the major responsibilities, not as Christians only, but as humans, was the prevention of the fierce persecution against the Jews. The movie did a good job in conveying some of these points, but did not cover it all. One of the things that the movie did not cover was the silence of the church and its inability to stand firm on the teachings of the gospel. Germany, during this period, had made it a law that the state will no longer protect any one group for which violence was possible, pretty much leaving the Jews very vulnerable. So Bonhoeffer stated 3 possibilities for the church. He said the church must ask the state whether it could answer for its actions as legitimate political actions. Number 2, the church has an unconditional obligation to the victims of any social order, even if those victims do not belong to the Christian community. And finally, he said that the church's responsibility is not only to bind up the victims beneath the wheel, but to put a spoke in the wheel if need be. During this time, the Christian Nazis had begun to infiltrate the church, bringing in their Nazi ideology into the doctrines of the church. Many pastors protested. Bonhoeffer wanted the church leaders to make their dissent noticeable and known, but many of them dismissed him because they believed that he was too radical or too political. Some of the opposing pastors opted to draft a new confessional statement, hoping to force the Nazi leaders in the church to develop their own future confession of teachings and actions. Bonhoeffer definitely wanted the Nazi Christians to state their intentions, whether they were going to Nazify the gospel or were they going to allow them to continue to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. He and a Lutheran friend named Hermann Sass, formed a small commission and retreated for a period of about 4 months to draft this confession, and he became known as the Bethel Confession. He distributed the confession, but as in the end, as expected, it got watered down, and he refused to sign it. At the World Council of Church in Denmark, Bonhoeffer challenged this International Assembly of Church Leaders to accept the church's responsibility to be daring in a cause for peace. The opposition pastors at this time also were gaining momentum, and they began to assemble seminaries for their own because the seminaries of the official church or the state church were filled with the regime's ideology of Nazism. And Bonhoeffer was one of the first theologians to be drafted and to be asked to lead the seminaries. In 1935, the protection of citizenship and race made it anti-Semitism a law, and it stripped Jews of their German citizenship and deprived them from their human rights. And in December of 1935, the state church announced that all the seminaries of the Confession Church were illegal. By 1937, the Gestapo closed the seminaries. But Bonhoeffer, just like portrayed in the movie, he continued to teach these underground seminary classes. He had a lot of the students didn't want to leave, and they continued to show. In March 12, 1938, the state church, as a birthday present to Hitler, ordered all the pastors to take an oath of allegiance to Hitler. All those who refused will be discharged from the spiritual office. Most pastors were willing to take the oath, including those of the confessing church, because they believed that the Lutheran Christians had the duty to obey the state. Bonhoeffer, however, and very few others refused to take that pledge of oath of allegiance to Hitler. Bonhoeffer concluded that as a Christian, he could not stand aside and hope for someone else to do something about it. For example, the assassination or the killing of Hitler. He later gave this analogy to others so they can understand why he partook in the conspiracy to overthrow Hitler. He said, "If I see that a madman is driving his car into a group of innocent bystanders, then I can't, as a Christian, simply stand by, wait for the catastrophe, and conform the wounded and bury the dead. Comfort the wounded and bury the dead. I must try to wrest the steering wheel away from the driver." And that's really what he said about changing his mind from a pacifist and being now a conspirator against the Führer. He became a part of the resistance unit, which was actually formed by Hitler's intelligence unit, who wanted to overthrow Hitler. Bonhoeffer's mission was to seek peace terms with the Allies, which will be implemented should the overthrow actually took place. However, they were never successful. Bonhoeffer later charged the church as a guilty bystander. And while in prison, he wrote many letters and started writing a book named Ethics, or titled Ethics, but he never got to publish it. And in one of those writings, he charged the church by saying, "The church was silent when it should have cried out, because of the blood of the innocent was crying out loud to heaven. It had stood by while violence in Rome were being committed under the name of Jesus Christ. She is guilty of the death of the weakest and the most defenseless brothers of Jesus Christ." Bonhoeffer exemplifies what a true Christian leader is, especially during the time of trials and despair, and one of the worst times of humanity has ever seen. And he, as a German, was expected to be German first and then Christian. But he refused to take that stand. He remained faithful and loyal to the teachings of Jesus Christ. He did die because of those principles that he decided to follow. But I believe, without a doubt, that he is one of the greatest leaders in the Christian community that has lived. He showed the courageous and the ability to care for the very broken, those who were regarded as not unworthy of living, even to death. I really enjoy the movie. I definitely recommend it. I definitely also recommend doing some research after or before the movie to have a better picture of the historical context, because so much happened that it is better if you have a bigger picture of an understanding of what was going on during that time.